Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine you've handed us a pile of sources, maybe articles, notes, even a transcript like today, and you need to get right to the heart of it fast.
That's what we do here.
Exactly. So today we're diving into this excerpt you shared. It's from a YouTube video transcript, and it captures this really charged exchange in a hearing.
It's quite a scene. It's all about navigating, sensitive information, accountability.
And honestly, some pretty remarkable verbal sidestepping. It's almost like performance art at times.
Huh, you could say that. It's like getting a ringside seat for this high-stakes information tug of war.
Yeah, where clarity is the prize, but evasion seems to be the main strategy being played. So our mission, unpack this conversation, figure out the core issues, and see what surprising bits pop out.
Maybe even find a little unintentional humor in how skillfully questions are dodged.
Definitely some of that. Okay, let's get into it.
It really is fascinating watching how information gets requested and then, well, how it gets avoided in these kinds of settings. This transcript throws us right into the deep end, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So we're looking at this part where a representative from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton, he's questioning a secretary. And he doesn't waste any time. He gets straight to a very specific and frankly pretty serious allegation.
Right, that's our starting point, setting the scene, laying out that core allegation.
What is it?
Well, the topic he brings up immediately is about texting the launch time for F-18s.
Okay.
F-18s going into combat over enemy territory, facing anti-aircraft missiles, and the launch time being sent on an unclassified signal chat.
Right. Just hearing that setup, it sounds concerning. F-18's combat zone, launch time, signal app.
Exactly. So the representative's first questions are super direct. He asks point blank, did that launch time come from Central Command? Yes or no?
Simple question, you'd think?
You'd think. But this is where the dance begins right away. The secretary kind of acknowledges it, says something like, I know what you're referring to.
The non-answer answer.
Pretty much. Refuses to confirm the source or the method, says he won't discuss communication methods.
Which, naturally, prompts the representative to push back. He says, it's a very simple question. Did it come from CENTCOM?
Yeah, he keeps pressing, and the exchange goes back and forth a bit until the secretary eventually says something that seems to imply, yeah, it was CENTCOM.
Yeah.
The transcript has this slightly awkward phrase, everybody knows the... Okay, so everyone knows the Central Command.
Not exactly a clear confirmation, but...
But it seems to be the closest they get to admitting the source, and that, of course, leads straight into the next big question.
Which brings us to what we were calling the classification tango. If the info did come from CENTCOM, then the critical follow-up is, was it sent on a classified system or an unclassified one?
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting, and you see this sort of strategic use of rules and definitions.
How so?
Well, the Secretary's response is basically that any way the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information is classified in and of itself.
Wait, the act of communication is classified, not the content.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's not something to be discussed in that setting.
Okay, that sounds unusual.
Yeah.
And the representative jumps on this. Right?
Oh, immediately. Because, that really goes against the standard understanding of how classification works in the DoD. He asks for the specific classification marking.
Like, was it marked secret? Top secret?
Or
confidential?
Exactly. He even cites DoD regulations that say classified information has to be marked and labeled. It's a direct challenge. Show me the marking. You can't just declare the channel itself inherently classified the content after the fact.
So does the secretary provide a marking?
No. Avoids it completely. The focus immediately shifts away from the classification question to the success of the mission against the Houthis. Quotes like, what's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
The pivot. Classic. Yeah. Got a tricky question about procedure. Talk about a successful outcome instead.
Precisely. And, this is where some of that sort of dark humor comes in, right? You have one person laser focused on these, very clear DoD rules about handling data.
Markings, labels, classified systems.
Right. And the other person is using this, let's say, flexible definition of classification and then immediately jumping to mission success. It's a total clash of objectives playing out in real time.
And the representative, Moulton, he doesn't just let that slide, does he? the weird definition.
No, he clarifies. He makes a really important point. It is not classified to say whether or not information was classified.
Ah, okay. So he's not asking for the classified detail itself, just its status.
Yeah.
Was it classified? Yes or no, which requires a marking.
Exactly. And based on the secretary's reluctance to confirm any marking and that earlier statement about everything being classified, the representative draws his own conclusion. He basically asserts his interpretation. The information must have been classified, and it was put on an unclassified system. He states it directly.
Wow. And the secretary's response to that direct accusation?
It's very carefully worded. Something like, I'm not trying to say that's what I thought.
Not quite a denial.
Not really. It's not denying the facts as the representative laid them out, but it's denying that was the secretary's thought or intent behind the representative's conclusion. Kind of leaves you hanging.
So the representative basically corners him, saying, your answers imply classified info went onto an unclassified system, and the secretary responds with something about his state of mind.
That's pretty much the shape of it. It's quite the verbal tightrope walk.
Which leads us nicely into the next big theme here, accountability, and the tactics used to evade it.
Right. Because the representative then brings up an upcoming DOD Inspector General report. Presumably, it's looking into this very incident.
Okay, the IG is involved, so the obvious question.
It's about accountability. Moulton asks directly, if that IG report comes back and says, yes, this information was classified and it was handled improperly, will the secretary take accountability?
Oof. Direct hit.
And he twists the knife a little. He brings up a quote, apparently something the secretary said previously, that accountability is bad. And he asks, well, doesn't that apply to you?
Wow. Okay, the gloves are off now. That's sharp.
It is. Using past words like that, it's a tough tactic. But the secretary, again, doesn't answer the accountability question head on.
What does he do?
He kind of repeats his earlier point about the content of the message. There were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
But wait, didn't he just imply earlier that everything he communicates from CENTCOM is classified by definition? The representative calls him on that, right?
Immediately. Says, hang on, you already admitted it was classified because you said everything from CENTCOM is.
So he's caught in a potential contradiction.
Seems like it. And the secretary's response is, well, it's a bit jumbled in the transcript. Something like, not what I said, I didn't confirm any classification, or, okay, so if it is, what I know is that everything I share, everything I talk about, it sounds like trying to backtrack or rephrase fast.
Yeah, sounds like someone trying to unsay something. It becomes this loop.
It does, and the representative tries to cut through it again, asking point blank, Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
And the answer, still no direct yes or no.
Nope, total pivot. The secretary starts talking about holding the Houthis accountable.
Oh, come on.
Yep. Then discusses leadership philosophy, like leadership by course, compares his style to others, mentions serving at the pleasure of the president.
Anything but answer the question about his accountability if the IG finds fault.
Exactly. It's textbook deflection. Specific question about personal responsibility gets answered with talk about adversaries, abstract leadership ideas, job security. You really see the game being played.
Okay, so after that intense back and forth on classification and accountability, the questioning shifts.
Yeah, the representative moves on to some broader operational stuff. First up, the cost. What do these operations against the Houthis actually cost?
Another attempt to get a hard number. Let me guess. Deflection first.
You got it. The initial response isn't a figure. It's more like, well, you have to compare it to other costs, like, you know, the cost of ships having to divert around Africa.
Okay, fair point maybe, but still not the number asked for. Does the representative offer one?
He does. He throws out a figure, several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion.
So he puts a number out there, even if it's an estimate, when the secretary wouldn't.
Right. Then the topic shifts again, this time to the Red Sea itself. Moulton asks how many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have actually sailed through the Red Sea since this whole operation started.
Okay, that's a very specific, measurable outcome. What's the answer?
The secretary gives a stark answer. Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration, the answer is 0.
0. And he presents that positively by comparing it to a previous administration.
Seems that way. It's an interesting framing because 0 ships getting through due to Houthi threats doesn't immediately sound like a measure of success for an operation meant to secure shipping.
Right. Does Moulton clarify? Because maybe the secretary meant military ships.
He does clarify immediately. He asks, you mean commercial vessels,
Right.
not military.
And the secretary confirmed.
Confirms. The answer is 0 for commercial vessels. 0 U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea. That number just hangs there.
Wow. Yeah, that speaks volumes about the actual situation on the water, regardless of the military actions.
It really does. It's a powerful bit of data that comes out of that exchange. Okay, so finally, the transcript covers one more area.
What's that?
Personnel changes, specifically firings.
Moulton asks how many generals and admirals the secretary has fired.
Yeah. The secretary says he doesn't know the exact number offhand.
Does Moulton?
He does. He provides the number 8.
8 generals and admirals fired. Okay. Does he ask why?
He does. Can you explain why any of them were fired? He even names one, General Kane, asking specifically, why did you fire him?
And the explanation. Is it specific? Performance-related?
Not really. The secretary's explanation echoes what he said earlier when deflecting. He says they serve at the pleasure of the president.
That phrase again.
That phrase again. And also that we want better representation in each and every of those.
So, pleasure of the president and better representation are the reasons given for firing 8 senior military leaders.
That's the explanation provided in this exchange, which leads to Moulton's rather pointed summary of that point.
Which is?
You can't explain why you fired any of them.
Ouch. Basically highlighting the lack of specific individual reasons given.
Yeah.
Just these broad statements.
Exactly. It suggests the reasons might be political or tied to desired demographic shifts rather than specific failures or performance issues, at least based on the answers given here.
Okay, wow. So let's try and synthesize this whole deep dive. We've been through quite a bit in this transcript excerpt. What are the main things that jump out?
Well, first and foremost, the whole initial issue, handling potentially classified info, that F-18 launch time, on an unclassified system like Signal, that kicked everything off.
Right. Then there was the major theme of accountability, or rather the challenge of getting any clear commitment to it in this public forum.
Definitely. And linked to that, the difficulty in just getting straight answers on basic operational details. Things like cost, the actual impact on shipping in the Red Sea, or even concrete reasons for firing top brass.
And connecting back to that idea of unintentional humor, or the political theater aspect.
Right.
What did the style tell us?
Oh, it was a masterclass in contrast, wasn't it? You had the representative with these super specific, almost technical questions about rules, markings, numbers.
Yeah, very focused.
And the secretary deploying this whole arsenal of responses. The strategic vagueness, the unusual interpretation of classification rules, the pivots to mission success, denying things said moments before, deflecting to totally different topics.
And the recurring pleasure of the president's line as a sort of catch-all explanation.
Right. It really shows these hearings aren't just about finding facts, they're performances. They're about narrative control, avoiding damaging admissions. And sometimes the resulting dialogue is just remarkably evasive, almost comically so, if the subject weren't serious.
And the specific details really stick with you. F-18s, Signal Chat, CNTCOM, DoD marking rules, the looming IG report that accountability is bad, quote.
The hundreds of millions, potentially billion-dollar cost estimate, the stark 0 U.S. commercial ships, the 8 fired generals, pleasure of the president. Those anchors make it real.
They ground it all. So why does this matter to you listening? This isn't just political point scoring.
No, not at all. This deep dive really highlights some fundamental dynamics. It shows how information about critical things, like military ops and government decisions, gets communicated or not communicated, how it's questioned, how it's controlled.
It puts the spotlight on the challenges faced by oversight bodies.
Right.
Trying to get transparency when dealing with sensitive topics.
Exactly. And it underscores why clarity on things like data classification, following procedures, and ultimately accountability, why all that is so crucial, especially when things might have gone wrong.
Understanding the tactics, the push and pull, the deflections, it gives you a lens to view how information flows or gets blocked in these high-stakes situations.
So, yeah, we've peeled back the layers on this really intense exchange. We saw that whole classification debate, the dance around accountability, the struggle to nail down specifics on operations and personnel. What stands out most to you after hearing all this?
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As you consider how information and responsibility work in these critical moments, here's something to mull over. We live in an age of instant communication, right? Signal, WhatsApp, whatever. But the lines around classified info are still supposed to be rigid. So when those lines get blurred or seem to be ignored, what does real meaningful accountability actually look like? And maybe more fundamentally, how much detailed truth can we, the public, realistically expect to get about sensitive government operations when the stakes are perceived to be so incredibly high?
That's a heavy question to ponder, worth thinking about.